back to the stage our final speaker of the afternoon, Isaac Morehouse.
I made Jason get up here and welcome me back because I'm really emotionally fragile. I needed you guys to clap for me to give me the energy to go on. Actually, I was out there in the halls. Thank you. I was out there in the halls like, guys, just one by one, I was trying to convince everyone to give me a good rating on those review sheets because it would crush me. All right, serious question. This morning, when I started, how many of you were like, this guy's going to talk to us about entrepreneurship and he's wearing flip-flops? No. Come on, who was thinking that? No. Anybody? Yeah, I thought so. All right. First of all, I'm taking the flip-flops off entirely because Michael just told us Steve Jobs was barefoot at venture capitalist meetings, so I'm sure to be successful now. The second thing is, I've only been here a couple days, and I've only been to the Bahamas one other time, but I might be wrong about this, but I get the impression you guys are entirely too respectful. You're entirely too respectful. You know, you think that if I'm wearing a suit and all that stuff, that somehow I'm going to know more about business. Just loosen up a little bit. Loosen up a little. Break the rules a little bit more, all right? Is that cool? Yeah. All right, all right. Forget about what all those old people are telling you, right? Okay. And then you can blame me. You can be like, Isaac told me to. One time I was in a school and I was getting into this flow and I was getting all hyped up about, why the school setting is not, you're not going to learn entrepreneurship in schools and it's just, memorizing for tests and blah, 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 and you've got to try things in the real world. And I think I said, when you think about it in school, when you get rewarded for following the rules, innovation in school is called cheating. That's entrepreneurship. And I got in trouble for that one. They didn't invite me back. Okay, so before I talk about this last talk of the evening, don't get bored, don't fall asleep on me. This is the last talk, all right? I'm going to try to bring some energy if I can. Before I talk about the virtues of entrepreneurship in terms of what entrepreneurship can do for the world, how powerful it really is, I want to first talk about for a second the virtues of entrepreneurship for you as an individual. Because I actually think that's more important. I actually think you've got to find the most valuable thing in the world to humans. What is the most valuable thing in the world for a human being? Time is a good one. I would say meaning. Meaning. Meaningful time. Time well spent. And if you don't have meaning in what you're doing, no amount of money or prestige or other people's approval of you is going to make you happy or fulfilled. And if you don't find meaning in what you're doing, when things get hard, and if you're an entrepreneur, it will get hard. It will get really hard. The promise of a lot of money or prestige is not going to be enough to sustain you when things get hard. So you've got to pursue what brings meaning to you. And if you're interested in entrepreneurship or any kind of career success, primarily because you want people to think you're cool, you want to walk around barefoot like Steve Jobs and Isaac Morehouse, right? I'm putting me and Steve in the same category. If you're doing it because you want to get rich, nothing necessarily wrong with any of those, but those are not going to sustain you when things are hard. It's really scary to step out there and do stuff. To overcome that fear, you need something deeper than just money or approval, prestige, which is what most of us really start out chasing. Those are the first things that we go after. What's going to make your parents proud? What's going to make people say, wow, good job? Magat talked about that. In her culture, if she wanted everybody around her to say, good job, we're proud of you, she would have gone through and gotten an MBA and gone and become a bureaucrat because that's respectable. But that's not enough. She had something that meant more to her. When I very first launched Praxis, the fall that we kicked it off, and I bootstrapped this thing while I was working elsewhere, and I finally get this thing off the ground, and I'm supposed to go give a talk to a university about Praxis, about learning, and this was kind of this was like the first time I was going to publicly talk that I'd launched this company, and I was going to try to recruit people. The week before that talk, my wife's father died suddenly, and my nephew, who was 4 years old, drowned suddenly. And I was going to do this talk, and it happened to be in the same city where my wife's father was from. And so what I thought was going to be a trip that I was so excited about to kick off the start of this company, I was going there for a funeral. And I had just come from another funeral. And now I've got to give this talk. And I remember sitting there in the auditorium before it started. And I had this feeling like, what am I doing? You know, I'm trying to get all pumped up and launch this business, but like my family members, I just had 2 people die. There's nothing, that just puts everything in perspective. And I had this feeling like I want to quit. I just want to retreat. I just want to hide somewhere safe. And somewhere in my mind, this voice said, this is the exact time when it's the most important. Because you don't know. You don't know how long you have. You don't know how long those around you have. All you can control is what you are doing with your time. Being reminded of the fragility of life really should make you think about spending more time on the things that are meaningful to you, not running away from them. And so I took that, and I gave the best damn talk I've ever given. I'm not kidding you. I gave that talk, and the first Praxis class, which was 6 people, 4 of them were in the audience that day. So then we get going, and I feel like this company's, it's like getting a little bit of traction, and we get 1 class, and now we've just only 6 people. It's very small. And the next time we get 8, and I'm feeling really good. And then the darkest of all times that I think I've been through as an entrepreneur happened. And I've actually never talked about this publicly or anywhere else since it happened. So it was only the 2nd class, and there was a young man that I had met at a conference, and he had tried some different business startups and had failed, and I could tell he was distressed. He had some family issues, and he was really interested in the program. So he ended up joining, and 3 months in, he ended up taking his own life. I have never felt more like I wanted to just quit. I got a call from someone telling me that this guy who was in my program, you know, these are like my kids. I had recruited him to do this. And I knew he had struggled with some stuff, but I didn't know the extent of it, that he had taken his own life. Now, the weight of that just stopped me in my tracks. And I didn't want to do anything for like a week. Because I couldn't help but feel like, was it my fault? Or could I have done something different? Or his family actually asked me, I didn't know them, that to come and speak at his funeral. And I did, you know, and I'm seeing the family. And so I was just down. And there was one after the other. We actually had 2 other people that we had to kick out of the program for various reasons. Like, it felt like we had momentum, and then it just took a nosedive. And someone taking their own life is about as far down as I could imagine. And I called my brother, same one that gave me the advice before, and I said, this isn't what I signed up for, you know? I want to change lives and make things better, and like, things are falling apart. Not only do all these people, I used to work around academia, I had all these good friends who were professors. Not only were they publicly ripping on me and mocking me and all this stuff that I started, like, okay, I got used to that. I got thick skin. Not only was it hard to fight for every square inch of progress, but now we're starting to lose. We had lost a couple participants. Now we literally lost someone, lost them to this earth. What more can I lose? I guess this just isn't right. And he said, Isaac, you remember when you had the idea for this company and you told me about it? And I said, yeah. And he said, that was real. That feeling you have, that passion, the meaning that this has to you, wasn't it? I said, yeah. And he reminded me of one of my entrepreneur heroes, Cornelius Vanderbilt. And he said, Vanderbilt, who's making these steamships and ferrying people across from major cities in the United States for way cheaper, faster than anyone else was doing it. It was amazing stuff, changing lives, giving people new opportunity. He said his steamships more than once sunk and like 100 people died. He literally was responsible for those deaths because it was his ship and his company. Now, if he had stopped then, the world we live in would look very different. What he ended up doing, not just in steamships, in steel, in energy, transportation, this guy was insane. He created so much wealth and changed the world as we know it. He said, if you let that beat you, you can do that. But you've got to dig deep. You've got to not look for, I need praise. I need people to obviously look. Because I can tell all the stories of people who have gone through our program and had their life changed in amazing ways. But I can't rely on the good outcomes and people being excited and happy about what I'm doing to motivate me every day. Because sometimes it's not like that. Sometimes your business partners get in a fight with you and they try to take the company. Sometimes your customers get mad at you. Sometimes people mock you. Sometimes people die. And if you're not motivated by something deeper, you won't make it through those times. So I just want to start with that and encourage you to find that meaning. There's 2 books I would recommend, by the way. One is Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl, who was a Holocaust survivor. And the way he survived the concentration camps was by finding a deeper meaning. Another one is called Outwitting the Devil by Napoleon Hill. It's a very obscure book. It's kind of weird. It's pretty amazing. I would encourage you to check those out. Okay, I did not plan that, but I felt like I needed to share it. You guys seem like you like getting real, right? All right. The virtues of entrepreneurship. So Michael talked about this a little bit, just how powerful this is for the world. I want you to look at this. This is 1800. Each of these dots represents a country, or I'm sorry, like a geographical region. So you can see up here, you've got Asia, Australia is red, Sub-Saharan Africa is blue, the Americas yellow. You get the idea. And the size is roughly proportionate to their population size, okay? This is the year 1800. This is income per person, and that's life expectancy. So you can see everything's clustered around about $1,000 per person, and the average life expectancy was about 32 years, pretty much everywhere in the world. And you've got the wealthier, European countries up here are like out here at 4,040 years average life expectancy. That was the entire world, 1800. This is 2015. Look at this. I mean, this is absolutely insane. Now we're looking at, in some cases, 40,000 in 85 years. In the worst cases, we're looking at around 50 years and 1,000, 2,000, 4,000. This happened in the span of a couple hundred years. All of human history was basically subsistence living, with rare exceptions of kings and people who would accumulate power through violence for the most part. In 200 years, this happened, from that to that. Now, just to drive the point home further, when you think of the United States in 1915, Model T, automobiles are new, young. Do you think of the United States in 1915 as just like a horribly impoverished, oh my gosh, that's just awful, it's so sad, it's a traumatic, terrible place? Would anybody think that? Oh, you think of like monocles and weird fashions, but you don't think of it as horrible living conditions. 100 years later, Angola is roughly the same, a little better off, frankly, in terms of average life expectancy as the United States in 1915. That's amazing. That's amazing when you think about that. That's very, very powerful. This is the virtue of entrepreneurship. This is what it does to the world. There is no government program, there is no private charity that can do this. All of those government programs not only redistribute, but also destroy wealth. Private charities in so much as they help someone in the short term. They're great, but they don't create wealth. They redistribute wealth. And that can be great in a time of crisis. If someone's hungry and you feed them once, but why were they hungry? Overcoming that only happens by creating wealth. Only entrepreneurship can do this, can go from here to here. That is powerful stuff. That's the virtue of entrepreneurship. Look at what we have today, if we want to make it an even smaller timeline. Okay, this was supposed to, let's see, I'm trying to think of the year here this was. I think this was comparing to 1980, oh yeah, here we go, 82, basically the 80s. So if you say 30 years, in 30 years, we all went from, like, if you wanted all of these technologies, you would have had to have almost $1 million 30 years ago. Today, they're in every smartphone, which can be a couple $100. So if you were to go back in time to 1980 and you had a smartphone, you would have a $1 million asset at your disposal. That is powerful. If you wanted to start a business in 1950 that did really anything very complex at all, you would probably need, to do what I'm doing, for example. I would probably need a travel agent, a secretary, and then another one to work the night shift because I go all hours. I would need office space that had a whole bunch of filing cabinets. I would need to drive to a print shop every time I wanted to produce a pamphlet or a book or a promotional piece of material, and I would have to buy like 50,000 copies because you couldn't do small prints of anything. Today, when I started, I have my phone, and I go to instaprints.com, and I pay somebody $5 on Fiverr who's in India to design a graphic, and I put it on a business card, and I order 50 of them for like $20, and it shows up at my house the next day. I didn't need an office. I didn't need a secretary. None of that stuff. That is amazing. That's powerful. That's what entrepreneurship has done, has unleashed this kind of innovation. Now, where do we not see it? Relative changes in U.S. Consumer Price Index, okay? Apparel, new vehicles, food, energy, shelter, look at medical care and college tuition. You think of this, a smartphone, the technology sector in general, you've got better, faster, cheaper all the time. You have in your pocket for a few $100s what was $1 million 30 years ago. It's the opposite with medical care and education. You've got these things outpacing inflation at 100, 200, 300% in some cases. They're getting more expensive, and the quality isn't really getting any better. The technology of the classroom is mostly still chalkboards and some PowerPoints thrown in. Why is that? What's wrong with these industries? Is there something just unique about the nature of these goods and services that they can't get better, faster, cheaper at the same rate? Not at all. The difference is there's no innovation. Not no innovation, but very little. Innovation is very hard. Why? These are heavily regulated and heavily subsidized. This is the thing that many people don't understand. If you like education, for example, you like healthcare, for example, you think, oh, well, those are good things. Governments should make them cheaper or make them free. That's the kiss of death for innovation. When you make things free, free education for all, free healthcare for all, the quality goes down, the access goes down, the incentive to innovate. The cheaper you make access to credit in the United States for student loans, the more people get them, the more colleges jack up their tuition. They become very insensitive to actually innovating and delivering something to the consumer. Because for the consumers, they're not paying anyway, so they don't care. When you go to the doctor in the U.S., you're not paying out of pocket, your insurance company is paying, so you don't ask how much things cost. The medical providers aren't competing. They're not saying, how can we innovate and do this better, faster, cheaper? They're just like, oh, what do you want? Do you need an x-ray? I don't know. Yeah, let's give you 2. Why not? And if you ever, I used to do this in the United States. I don't know what the medical system is like here, but I would go in and I would say, hey, how much does this procedure cost? And they'd look at me like I was crazy. What? Well, you're not paying, it's insurance. I said, you don't know if I'm paying or not. I just want to know. And they literally wouldn't know. They'd have to look it up, and they were, well, it depends on this. There's all these codes. And they don't even know how much the product is they're selling you. There's no direct accountability between consumer and producer. This is ultimately my motivation for Praxis. It started 12 years ago when I was a college student. I was pissed off because I felt like I am not being treated like a customer. Because I wasn't. If I was unhappy, it didn't affect the professor's pay at all. There was no direct line of accountability. They were getting money from a government agency or a loan agency that was going through some bureaucrat that was going somewhere else, and the professor was going to get paid no matter what. And I'm just sort of part of this process for them. But I'm not the consumer. I'm not the one who's going to take my money and go elsewhere if I'm unhappy. It's the same with healthcare. That's what kills those industries. When you don't have the incentives for innovation, you won't get all these benefits, all these virtues of entrepreneurship. Let me give you a contrasting example of the political process versus the entrepreneurial process. Anybody know who that is? Jeff Bezos. He's the founder of Amazon. You guys ever buy stuff on Amazon? Yeah? Such an amazing place. I am a citizen of Amazon Prime. I don't even consider myself a United States citizen anymore. I'm a citizen of Amazon Prime. That's my country. If I could have one. I hope they start selling government services because I would buy them. All right. So this is what's so cool. Jeff Bezos, now I don't know if this is true or not, but this is what he claims. What do you think his passion is in life? What's the meaning that he drives? What's he trying to accomplish? We would think like, I don't know, sell books, which is what they started doing, sell everything, become the marketplace of the world, bring down prices, build a transportation infrastructure, all these things that Amazon's doing. That's actually not it. He claims his motivation has always been a colony on Mars. Wait, what? What does that have to do with Amazon? He's been obsessed with space travel and space tourism since he was a student. But he says, I knew that to do anything in space, the costs are really, really high. So I'm going to have to make billions of dollars. So he wants to go do something in space. So he creates Amazon. Now, again, it's not like, I got to make billions of dollars. Okay, I guess I'll do it. Like, it's so easy. But this is the story anyway. He has to, in order to achieve his dream, he has to create value for customers. He's got to relentlessly satisfy customers. He's got to create value for the world, make you better off by purchasing from him than you would be otherwise. So it's a win-win. And he's done that so much that now he has a space company. He was one of the first to be able to land a reusable rocket. He's, along with Elon Musk and there's a bunch of other guys, Paul Allen, a lot of guys who have been successful, are trying to go into space. And what they've done in just the last 10 years has been more innovative and has dropped costs like 10, 20, 30 times over what NASA had done for the past 60 years. I mean, NASA's basically still using the same technology that was used then, except for the stuff that these guys have created. So not only did they innovate a lot faster, but the way they got the resources to do it, they created value first. Think about the incentive structure. If he channeled those energies, if he channeled that goal to do space travel into politics, he would have had to go around trying to pass laws that forcibly took money from you via taxation or from me, and then take that money with very little accountability, with no consumer to walk away from. He didn't have to create value for anyone. He just had to give nice speeches and get a budget approved of other people's money, right? What NASA has been doing for decades and decades. Instead, he said, I got to go get the money myself. So he created massive value for the whole world in order to pursue his dream. That's the incentive structure that I want. If people have a dream, whatever it is, I want them to have to please consumers, to have to create value to be able to get it. Okay? All right, so 3 distinct ways that entrepreneurship creates value. First, it's just the straight up direct value creation of trade, right? Traded juice box for cupcake, created wealth. That's actually a picture of me just a few years ago. No, people always tell me that I look really, really young, so I always have to make jokes and let people guess my age and stuff. Maybe we can do that later. It's a fun game. Okay, so directly by creating wealth. Every trade is a win-win. We'll talk about that in a second. The second way that entrepreneurship creates value is, I couldn't find a good picture of this. It's not a diving board. It's a platform. Entrepreneurship, a new innovation creates a platform upon which additional innovations can be built. It's this constant process of building on what's come before. And then finally, oh, yeah, I was like, what in the world is that one supposed to represent? Forgot my own notes. Information. Entrepreneurship creates vital information that helps allocate resources to their highest valued use. So, directly. Direct creation of value. This is the win-win of trade. Steve Jobs. Imagine if Steve Jobs was president. That would have been horrible, I think. This guy was kind of crazy. He was kind of a jerk, from what I hear, like hard to work with. Kind of a bit of a, tyrant in his own company. Brilliant, visionary, but really stubborn. And I could just see him, if he had the power to force everybody to do things and to use the coercive force of law, I don't think I would want that. Now, on the other hand, he probably wouldn't be able to get elected president anyway, because he wasn't very good at trying to appeal to everyone and trying to please everyone and trying to placate everyone. So you've got this incentive structure in politics where you have to be so plain vanilla that you couldn't offend anybody, which is not a good recipe for creating a lot of value and innovating. On the other hand, if you are really innovative, the scariest thing would be to give this guy unlimited power. What's beautiful about what he did, the value he created, was because he had to be accountable. He had to be accountable to customers. At the end of the day, he could have whatever vision he wanted, but if it wasn't actually valuable for customers, it wouldn't work. So trade has to be a win-win. How does this work? It's because value is subjective. So if I sell you something, let's say I sell you this clicker, and now you get to do whatever you want while I'm talking. I sell you this for $5. You're happy, I'm happy. Value was actually created. Even though no new goods were created, value was created. How? Because I valued your $5 more than the clicker, and you valued the clicker more than the $5. As long as it was voluntary, we wouldn't trade unless we both believed that. So I actually have created value just by making that trade. So every time, value is created. And you have to create value to survive as an entrepreneur. Okay, so that's the first virtue of entrepreneurship, is the direct creation of value. All right. Oh, and by the way, if you're not creating value, if you're losing value, no one should think, man, we need to bail out losing companies, because they're actually destroying value. They're taking a resource that the market values at a certain price, they're doing something to it, and then selling it, but they can't sell it. They have to sell it for less than what they took it in for, so they're literally destroying value. We want that to stop fast. We don't want to subsidize and encourage that. Sometimes it takes time to figure it out, but okay. So the direct creation of value with trade. Number two, entrepreneurship as a platform. One innovation unleashes a torrent of others. This is something that no planner, no government body, no agency could do or think of, because the people themselves didn't think of it. When you invent, the smartphone, you're not thinking of all the things it's going to be doing way down in the future. People have made apps where you can blow into it like a flute. You can do just crazy stuff, right? And then those apps create a platform for something else to be above and beyond that. Now you've got things like digital currencies because of this that's in everybody's hands. You've got banking being done via text message. I know that this is a thing that's going on in Africa. Those weren't things that people thought of ahead of time, and you couldn't. So if you're trying to get some sort of government board to say, how can we improve the economy? How can we go from where we were in 1800 to now? How can we lift the standard of living? Even if you thought of let's make a better phone. We would all just think of a phone. Like when the first phones had cameras on them, I was like, this is so stupid. Phone and a camera are two totally different things. That's like having a banana on a pickup truck. I don't know. What is the point? I don't get it. Now I want a banana. The power of suggestion. But I couldn't have thought of that. Nobody could. We would just design a phone. But you create something new and innovative that's a platform for other things. The App Store in whatever phone you have is a platform that inspires other people to innovate on top of it. So these innovations build on each other, and they go in directions that no one could foresee or predict. So you can't plan for them, which is why you just need to get out of the way in terms of institutions, laws, regulations, and create the space for that to happen. Okay, number three, information. This is really, really powerful. And I know I mentioned my favorite economist, Ludwig von Mises, before. He was really big on this. He broke down the reason why socialism cannot ever produce a high standard of living. Because if you don't have private ownership of the means of production, if you don't have private property where people can buy and sell and trade, not only do you not have the incentive for people to, if I can't earn very much money anyway, I'm not going to go do a bunch of innovating. If everything's owned, commonly by everyone, I have no incentive to improve it. But the information is the thing that Mises focused on. We don't know at any given time what the most valuable use of any resource is. Nobody does. What's more valuable use of, 10 tons of rubber? In the soles of shoes, or in cars, or in some manufacturing facility, or on an AstroTurf field in a football stadium? Which one of those is more valuable? Anybody have an idea? None of us have an idea. We don't know. We don't know what's going to create the most value. What we need is a process that allows entrepreneurs to experiment, to try and fail. And what they do, not only can it create value for you directly if you buy from them, not only can it be a platform for other innovations, but it sends a signal rippling through the economy that perks up everybody else's ears, investors, entrepreneurs, other industrialists. That's what the price system does. That's what the profit and loss system does. If I see that you're taking $5,000 to pay some guy to sit down and code a little game that's 99 cents in the App Store and sell it, and you're making tons of money, I'm going to say, whoa, for $5,000 to pay somebody to do this, you can make $50,000. That's pretty awesome. I'm going to start dumping money into that, and then that's going to raise his price. And then that's going to bring the price down on the other end because now you have more competition. And the resources will keep going there until it's no longer profitable. And then they'll go somewhere else. And that's exactly how it should be. Our tastes change, our preferences change, what's possible changes. At any given time, we don't know what the best use of resources is. So any government planning board is like, we shall have this many people that work in this industry and this many whatever that goes here. You can't know that. You need a free-flowing process that lets people, crazy people, try and experiment and fail. Because here's the beauty of the informational aspect of entrepreneurial action. It's this weird combination of ignoring everyone's opinion and listening to it. Now follow me here. This is Henry Ford. And he's famous for saying, you can't just produce what people want. Right? Because you would think from hearing me say you got to produce things that people value in the trade. He said, because if I would have asked people what they wanted, they would have said a faster horse. Because they didn't have that imagination, the narrative vision and imagination to see that horse travel was insufficient. He saw that. So he said, if I would have just asked people, what do you want? Oh, we want a faster horse. Okay, I'll make you a faster horse somehow, I guess. I can make a few dollars. Pretty competitive business. Steve Jobs was very similar. Don't ask customers what they want. They don't know because they haven't imagined it before. You've got to show them something new. And so you don't listen to what everyone says, what all the common sense is. You try something new, but here's where you do have to listen. Because if you try, you say, look, I'm going to introduce you to this thing. It's called an automobile. It's amazing. If it doesn't create any value for them and they never buy it, then you're wrong. You go out of business and resources go somewhere else. And that's as it should be in a healthy, functioning economy. If every bad idea is subsidized, you'll never have real innovation because all the incentives will be wrong. This is why when people say entrepreneurship is really important, therefore government needs to be involved and incentivize it. No. The only way to incentivize is to get the hell out of the way. Because when government gets involved, they try to pick which entrepreneurs are successful. Oh, wind energy. We need wind energy. Let's pay everybody to do that. Then you divert all this entrepreneurial energy into something that we don't even know if it's valuable because there's no profit and loss signals because it's being subsidized. So you need this information. You need the ability to say, I'm not going to listen to the market. I'm going to do something different. But you also need the consequences. If you win, you should be able to reap those rewards. Not only because it's fair and just, but because then that will send a signal to everyone else. Oh my gosh, he's making tons of money. I got to launch a car company. If you lose, you should suffer those losses. Not only because it's fair and just, and it wouldn't be fair to take money from others to cover up your losses for taking a risk, but because it sends a signal to the rest of the economy. That didn't work. Don't try it. That's a waste of resources. That's destroying value. Very, very important. Those signals, that information is massively important. Okay, so just another way to visualize what we started with. This is world GDP. And if you went back before 1500, it would basically look the same for as far back as we can go. Right around here, 1800, a little after, that insane spike. That cannot be created by good intentions, by compassion, by charity, certainly not by government programs. Those things can do things, those things can be fine, but you cannot create that kind of wealth without entrepreneurial innovation. I would go so far as to say, actually I'm totally comfortable saying this, I don't even think it's radical. McDonald's has done more to solve poverty than every government program in history. I'm not kidding you. Think about how radical it is. For like $1, you can buy something that has more calories and nutritional value than it would have taken like, 100 acres of land and God knows how many hours to get that back a couple hundred years ago. Now, you may or may not like all of these companies, and especially as they get large, some of them get in bed with government. That's not great. But the power of what Bill Gates has done with Microsoft eclipses by 10 or 100 times all of his charity work. That doesn't mean the charity work is bad, but it just tells you if you really want real progress and growth, you cannot just do the stuff that feels good. You've got to do the stuff that creates wealth. I like to tell people, if you want an easy job, work for the Red Cross. Now, I don't mean it easy because it's going to be easy. I mean easy because everyone will love you. You'll get the quick dopamine hit. You'll get praise that will make you feel good, right? And there's nothing wrong with that. I'm not ripping on that. Don't misunderstand me. But if you just want people to say, wow, good for you, go work for the Red Cross. No one's ever going to say, oh, you work for the Red Cross? You are such a selfish a-hole, right? That stuff's fine, but that's not going to create this. If you want to change the world in a massive way, create value for people. Now, here's the thing. You probably won't get that, oh, you are so wonderful and kind. In fact, you might get the opposite. You might get people accusing you of being selfish, being, overly focused on money or whatever else. Ignore that. Pursue that meaning and create value for people. That's what's going to change the world. In fact, I would go so far as to say, to tie it in with what I opened with, there's a paradox involved here. If you really want to make the world a better place, you don't need to focus on how can I serve the world. You need to focus on following your own curiosity and meaning. There's this author called Bernard Mandeville, a long time ago, who has this satirical poem about a beehive. And all the bees are basically pursuing their own, vices, their own pleasures. But in so doing, they're actually bringing about the good of the hive. Adam Smith, much more famously, talked about the invisible hand. He has this famous line, economist who's sort of considered the father of economics, where he says, it's not from the benevolence of the butcher that we get our meat, but from his regard to his own self-interest. He's pursuing his own self-interest, trying to earn money. Because of that, if you're in a market context, the only way he can earn money is by creating value for you, by selling you food. And so for him to pursue his self-interest successfully, he has to create value for you. That's what a market does with good incentives. And Smith said, everyone is guided as if by an invisible hand to bring about the benefit of everyone when they're pursuing their own self-interest. So I'm going to tell you right now, be more selfish. I mean that in the best of ways. I like it. I got one guy who's like, yeah. Now everyone afterwards is going to be like, oh, I saw him. He is selfish. Be more selfish. I mean it. This is harder than you think to do. Get to know what you really value. Not what your parents or everyone else praises you for or thinks you should value. What matters to you, and pursue it with abandon. Do that. Because paradoxically, if you do that, if you do you, that's going to do more for the world than anything else. This is one of my favorite quotes. Don't ask yourself what the world needs. Don't. Feels good. Oh, what does the world need? I'm selfless. No. Ask yourself what makes you come alive. And then go and do that, because what the world needs is people who have come alive. All right? Thank you. All right, we got time for a couple questions. Anybody got questions? I know half of you are like, I don't have any questions. Half of you are like, I kind of do, but I'm sitting in the middle, and I got to stumble over 7 people to get to the microphone. We can maybe pass the microphone down, too, if you're in the middle, if that's your holdup. Yeah, or you can just say from your chair. You can shout it out. Remember, don't be too respectful, guys. Yeah.
I just look at the chart you just had with the world. I just look at the chart, and with the world GDP per capita, it only stopped at 1,500. What happened prior to that?
Yeah.
And cultural rise in this region as well. I mean, that gives me a sense of which region we're actually discussing. I mean, because it could be beautiful here, and further down, another island is hellhole.
Yes. So the reason that it stopped at 1,500 is because the data is just much harder to get before that. But if you, whatever data you can sort of put together in terms of what was the GDP or the standard of living for the world, I mean, it really isn't changed much if you go back even thousands of years until 1800. That is what economist Deirdre McCloskey calls the Great Fact, the Industrial Revolution. At around that time, all of the world just went on a trajectory that's unlike anything that's been seen in history before, unless there was an ancient alien civilization that we don't know about. You know, I've seen those shows on the History Channel. In terms of the regions, so in that first chart you saw like the different regions were represented. I am totally with you. Like aggregate data can be really, really misleading. So yes. Like the United States compared to, I don't know, one of the poorest places you could find in the world, there's a huge difference. But even the poorest places in the world today are better off than even relatively well-off places were prior to 1800. That's what's amazing. Now, it doesn't mean there's always, again, if you're an entrepreneur, you always see problems. It doesn't mean there's always, like, when you see poverty based on what we're used to today, you want to fix that. You want to make that better. But what's powerful to me is to know that even what we consider poverty today, in many ways, in terms of the length of life, in terms of access to some forms of medical care and even some nutrition, is actually better than most people had for most of history prior to that. If you want to go look more in that data, there's a place called gapminder.com that has a whole bunch of, you can break out more specifically by country and look at some of the historical data. And it's pretty fascinating. You guys are all quiet after I made a joke about aliens. You're like, dude, who is this barefoot guy? What a weirdo.
Hey, brother. Just had a quick statement. I'm from New York City, but I've been doing business here in the Bahamas and been coming back and forth since I was 19 years old. And one thing I want to say is this is great, but for you Bahamians, what I recommend is social reform in terms of like how things are done out here, because it's very difficult to start a company here in the Bahamas or to become an entrepreneur. In the States, you can start a company, you know, get a tax ID number in minutes. You can start a company in a day, but out here the process is very, very difficult, and it's the reason why this country isn't breeding entrepreneurs. So I just encourage you all, as you know, the youth especially, to encourage, you know, social reform and you know, end the bureaucratic ways of this country. But it's just something to take into consideration. That's great, you know, but definitely something you want to think about.
Yeah, when you face those things, and it's actually surprisingly, in the US, it can be surprisingly difficult sometimes too, depending upon what you're trying to do. Increasingly, the licensing and regulations are getting worse, unfortunately. But when you face that, I always think you always have to first get your mindset right. Because if all you do is get angry about the injustice of it, you've already lost. If all you do is say, it's so unfair, it's so unjust, the system is against me, and that's it, you've lost. But if you can, change your mindset and say, it's a game. It's all a game. Okay, what are the incentives involved? Everybody involved is a rational actor. Why are these politicians doing that? They have some incentive that makes them want to do this. They must be getting some payoff. How can I understand the incentive structure? Can I change the incentive somehow? Because politicians will not act just because it's right. If you say, you should remove this bad law, And they say, why? Because it's the right thing to do. Here's all the data about it from the Nassau Institute. Great research. They'll say, yeah, it's great research. But I can't do that because I've got some special interest group that's paying me or helping me stay in power if I keep the law in place. They're going to respond to incentives, not just a good feeling. I did the right thing. So you have to change the incentives. Can you create an incentive that makes it more? Milton Friedman said this. He said the solution is not to get the right people into office, because if you do, they'll do the wrong thing anyway. The solution is to create a system where it's politically profitable for the wrong people to do the right thing. So you change those incentives. You make it so that they're afraid if they don't enact this reform, if they don't remove these regulations, they'll be run out of office. Or that there's some sort of benefit to do it. That's one way. Another way is to, as I mentioned before, if the incentives are awful and you can't start your company, find a place where you can. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. You shouldn't feel guilty if that's what you have to do. And in some ways, that can actually put competitive pressure. If everybody is leaving, eventually that can change the incentives. If leadership in the Bahamas is like, we're losing everyone, why? And they're all like, well, because we can't start a business. That is another form of putting that pressure. And then there are other times, and this one, I'm not going and saying that I'm recommending this, but you have to understand your own risk tolerance. There are other times we're just breaking the rules. We're breaking the laws. Sometimes that has to be done. Sometimes that's necessary. I think people who, like illegal immigrants in the United States, to me, are heroic. You know, if it's an immoral law, the most moral thing in the world is to break it. If someone said it's against the law for you to feed your family, would it be bad for you to break that law? Now again, you know, I don't want you calling me and being like, hey, I'm in jail, it's your fault, you know. You have to know what you're willing to do, and some laws have higher risk than others. But sometimes you can even call the bluff of governments. And this is what I mentioned about Uber doing. You know, they're like, they come to Charleston, and everybody loves it. And the government's like, oh, they're disrupting the taxi cartel who pays us money, and it's this little cozy thing. We're going to keep them away. We're gonna ban them. And they just assumed, because this is what companies usually do. They pass a law, you can't do Uber, that Uber would say, oh, we're sorry. And then Uber would come and try to pay them money to get the law, because that's what they want. They want to get a little cut of everybody's business. Not unlike a mafia. But what Uber did in that case was they said, forget about it. We're just going to break the law anyway. And all of a sudden the government was like, crap. Do we really want to start arresting Uber drivers and putting them in prison? Because we're going to look really bad if we do that. And they backed off. Now, in some cases, they might start arresting Uber drivers. It depends on the situation you're in. But I just want you to know, and Magat has something to say. Go ahead.
Yeah, but I really want to go back to what that man up there, what was his name? Josh. To what Josh is saying, because, you know, you're from the US, and you're lucky to work out of a country that actually, you know, there are a lot of things that the United States doesn't want to do because it has a lot of consequences in the rest of the world. But for people like us who live in countries like this, and also the one point that I think we're not taking into account is the role of foreign aid. Because what we're talking about, oh, put the pressure, yes, we have to put the pressure, but sometimes I look at my government, I'm like, Senegal, quite frankly, seems like they don't care whether we're poor or rich. It doesn't matter. Because there's so much money. Actually, the poorer we are, the more money comes from abroad, you know, so that they can go and buy their, you know, their chateaus in the south of France and the Ferraris and Lamborghinis, you know, like, and they're flying them in, you know, in planes, and they're flying their hundreds of people for their daughters, you know, birthdays in the middle of I mean, it's crazy. So I think I really want to make sure we don't forget what he's talking about, though, because we have our own realities, and to me, that's why I insisted earlier that we have to really make sure that every young person in countries like ours becomes really well educated on these issues so that they know where to put the pressure at the government, because at some point, look, if the US was a no man's land, you know, like most of our countries are, what's going on in the US is not going to happen in the US. It's just a fact. So I'm just saying, yeah, I'm willing to take what's happening in the US as how do you say that, as an example, but we also have to do the hard work, and the solution is not always going to be for us to leave. We have to sit here and we have to fight this. But good news is it's fightable. It's fightable. So I just want to make sure we hear what you're saying, Isaac, but I also want to make sure that we don't forget what Josh is talking about, because you know, we want to stay in our countries too and make them great.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm going to wrap up with two things, because then we're going to wrap up. So don't misunderstand me at all. I'm not saying, oh, just leave. I'm saying if what you know, what brings meaning to you, the only way to do it is to leave. And that doesn't just mean leave the country. I mean, that can mean a lot of things, as I mentioned before. If you have a group of friends that's just keeping you down, or that's, you know, not bringing the best out of you, you might have to do that at some point. Okay? But when it comes to making the Bahamas better, if this is what you love and you want to be here and you want to make it better, I think there are two approaches that are both powerful and valid. Because at the end of the day, everything governments do is constrained by the beliefs of the public, ultimately. They will only do what they can get away with. But beliefs are shaped by two things, ideas and experiences. So ideas is directly educating people, helping them understand why free markets are better. And by doing so, hoping that that will change the incentives. If a huge number of the population passionately believes in freedom, it's going to be really hard for a politician to do something other than that. But ideas directly communicated through argument are a small part of what shapes people's beliefs. Another part is experiences. So if people don't know that there's anything better, they don't know that they're even to be unhappy. They don't even know that, you know, take the Uber example. If you would have asked somebody, you know, what's wrong with taxis? I don't know, nothing. You know, are taxi cartels bad? Look, they create a deadweight loss and they're unfair. Let me show you all these white papers. They'd be like, whatever, I don't care. Because they can't imagine anything better. When I said to people, are universities efficient and the most valuable way to get a job and whatever else? I don't know, seems like it. And I was like trying to argue with them, but there's a better way. I couldn't just tell them, I had to show them. I had to actually create something different. And so if you create a new experience and say, look, taste this, see this, they're like, oh my gosh, I want more of that. Why don't we have more of that? You know, oh, I've taken Uber. Wait a minute, the government's trying to shut it down? That's insane. And now the politicians, the incentives change. Now they're on the hot seat because everyone's, you know, coming banging on their door and saying, why are you trying to take away this thing that I love? So I think innovating, creating new experiences through entrepreneurship, or creating new ideas and educating people are both ways to change the incentives. But when it comes to political reform, it's all about the incentives. Don't be misled into thinking it's about electing better people. It's about changing the fundamental incentives. Study public choice theory, if you want, before you get involved in political reform, to understand how the incentives work. Do we have time for another question or no? We don't? All right. I'll be around. We can talk a little bit more afterwards. Guys, you've been awesome.
All right. So thank you again for spending your Friday with us. I hope you guys enjoyed it. I really enjoyed your questions and you guys sharing your stories. Did you guys enjoy today? Great. I'm so glad. So again, I just wanted to thank you guys and thank the Nassau Institute and College of Bahamas, specifically the Business School, for having us. Thank you to our speakers for traveling all the way here to speak for us. And just a reminder to you guys, please fill out those feedback surveys that we handed out. If you don't have one, we have extras at the tables outside in the lobby. And then before you leave, if you are one of the people who registered by noon on Wednesday, we have a certificate for you, full with your name and everything in the back. So as you make your way out, if your last name begins with A through L, your certificate is on this side. And if it's M through Z, it's on this side. And we'll just ask you to turn your certificate in at the table, or turn your survey in at the table, and then we'll give you your certificate. Again, encourage you to check out our website, fee.org. We have an entire Economics of Entrepreneurship course if you guys are interested in that, as well as other materials for you guys. So thank you again so much for coming.
Before you go, well, you're going anyway. I have to do it. Well, thank to the Foundation for Economic Education, our host, the College of the Bahamas, soon to be the University of the Bahamas, the Templeton Foundation Religion Trust, a sponsor of this event, and the Nassau Institute of sponsors, Compass Point, Go Ahead Biscuits, Arizona Drinks, Bahamas Wholesale Agencies, Automotive Industrial Distributors, Sbarro, and Windermere Corporate Services. And finally, to Sarah Morrison, and Jason Riddle of the Foundation for Economic Education, and to our speakers, Isaac Morehouse, Magad Wade, and Michael Strong. We want to present them with a token of our appreciation for coming to the Bahamas. So these books